Welcome to our Senior Living Smart Partner webinar. Today we welcome David Colling, President of Strategic Dining Services. He has pioneered fine cuisine in the dinner cruise market, serving as Chief Operating Officer of Odyssey Cruises, active in Chicago, Boston, and Washington, D.C. David also served as Vice President of Corporate Services for Senior Lifestyle Corporation, which operates more than 80 retirement communities nationally. He led the company's corporate support team in the areas of hospitality, programming, dining services, property operations, and purchasing. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Michigan State University and was twice nominated for Inc. magazine's Entrepreneur of the Year award, and has received the Partner in Elder Care Award from the state of Illinois for his work in providing meals for seniors in need. Please feel free to send your questions or comments, and feel free to tweet questions or comments at GetSLSmart #SeniorLivingDining. Now let me turn the webinar over to David, who will discuss how to really deliver restaurant-style dining. David, it's to you.
Okay, so what I want to speak to you about today is really delivering restaurant-style dining in your community, and what that means, and how to bring that to life in what you do every day. And we're going to really focus on 3 different areas to help you execute this. And what we're going to do is walk through this, hopefully. 3 areas. 1, menus. First of all, telling the story, setting it up. The second part will be the execution. And lastly, service and the delivery. By really focusing on these 3 areas, we're going to move from what many of us are doing and what we think of maybe a restaurant delivery to real restaurant level execution. And we'll talk through these areas, and hopefully by the end of the presentation, you'll have better insight into whether this is something that you're capable of doing and that can come alive in your communities. So first and foremost, we start with the menus, because the menus really tell the story of what we're trying to do. They, if you will, excuse the pun, but they set the table for what it is we're trying to achieve. The menus have to look and perform more like a restaurant experience, which means they have to read like a restaurant menu reads. Many times when we get into a senior living community, we'll look at the menu and realize this is written very, very different. It's more of an a la carte type of design where we're picking and choosing all over the menu what it is we'd like to order. Unfortunately, this provides our residents sometimes the opportunity to make bad choices, even though we can't control that many times, but we can push and drive them into an area so that they can have a new experience, try a new vegetable, try a new fruit, without really understanding they're even being asked to move in that direction. So we'll focus on that menu piece of it. This is kind of traditional how many menus look in the communities that we visit. It will have a list of the products, including things like house salad and fish of the day. And if you'll notice then too, we have the vegetables or starches usually listed all together so that residents can choose which they would like with their particular entree. But again, many times we see them, 1, either choosing things that are inappropriate for them from a health standpoint. 2 to 3 starches, for instance, is very common. Or 2, they're really not enjoying the benefit of the entire menu because they're not having the starch and vegetable that is appropriate with a particular entree. So again, when we move to a more restaurant-style menu, we get to start telling a story about the food that we're serving. We start to be able to influence our residents' choices. So instead of potato soup, it reads creamy 3 cheese and potato soup. If I'm a cheese lover, that just sealed the deal for me. I'm going to try it. The house salad isn't just a house salad. It's a garden green salad with fine ripe tomatoes and an orange vinaigrette. So we really start telling a story about the food that we're serving. And it, again, sets the table to what is to come. Seared flounder with red pepper aioli is a very different reading than fish of the day, even if it generates some questions as to what those products are. Creamy ham casserole is a very different than grilled ham with broccoli and Parmesan cream sauce. And then listing the vegetables that are appropriate with that particular item. It's very powerful in telling the story. Black Forest cake becomes a little bit different when we talk about it as chocolate Black Forest cake with toasted coconut frosting. If we don't do the things before the meal comes out to really set up that this is the approach that we have, we won't be able to convince our residents that there's a difference. And really, what is that difference in the big scheme of things? We're talking about cooking what we call, from a culinary standpoint, a la minute, to the minute. We're preparing food for our residents almost as they order it. And you think, well, maybe that's not possible with my population and the size of the scope of your building. I assure you that it is, but it has to certainly come with some modification of execution. But we can all do that. At home, we don't make dinner at 4 o'clock and then just hold on to it and serve it at 7. There's a reason for that. We know that that food is going to taste the best when it's just completed and ready to be served. So here's how that original menu reads now the second time through, and tells a completely different story. The second part of the focus, and really the big piece for success, is the execution. We have to set up the kitchen to succeed. We have to write recipes that are appropriate. We have to focus on batch size and the steam table use. But before we go into execution, just one more point on the menu writing. One of the things that we also need to remember is that if we're trying to execute a la minute or restaurant style service that we're cooking and preparing, many times you may have heard pushback from a chef or a dining service director that our menu is just too big to do that. We've just got too many things. To me, that's always an alarm that says, why do you have so many things? In the restaurant world, we see restaurants many times who don't have a real story to tell about the quality of their food. They'll rely on portion size. And you all know those restaurants. They just have enormous portions of mediocre food. Many times in the senior living world, what we will see is communities that are struggling with food satisfaction from their residents, particularly when they start talking about variety. And variety means a couple of things. One, the number of choices I have, but really what it means is the quality of the choices I have. I'm not finding the things that I love. Well, many times we'll see in the senior living world that the community will shift to broaden the menu, to offer more things to the residents, to try to make them happy, to appease them. So the menu grows in its breadth all the time. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, thinking that this is offering more to our residents, when in fact many times it has the opposite effect. By offering more and more items, we're less effective on our ability to execute. The more we have going on in the kitchen, the harder it is for that team to pull it all off. So as those menus grow in size and scope, our performance goes down, and that's even in a great kitchen, in a kitchen that can execute very well. If we give them more and more, their consistency and ability to execute will continue to go down. So for some of you, you may have to look at this and say, if we're going to execute at this level, we may have to tighten our menu a bit. We may have to shorten it a bit. But that doesn't mean you're not offering all the things the residents want. If you're focused on quality, the things the residents get will be so much better that they won't need the scope. They really are asking for quality when they're talking about that variety issue many, many times. So again, the second part, execution. Set up the kitchen to succeed. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that we have to have in place a kitchen design that's ready to handle food in small batches and execute to the minute. Well, most of our kitchens are set up that way. It's just that we have augmented them over time to do more of this kind of steam well holding large batches of food cooking. All we have to do is modify small things around the kitchen so that we can move food through much quicker. So it's a really small thing that your team will catch on to very, very quickly, knowing where they'll need space, what burners they'll need to be cleared and available for cooking to the minute. We also now have to modify, however, recipes. They need to plate this plating strategies, and by that I mean we can't have recipes that say, you know, that we're making 50, 60, 70 items of a certain product. The recipes need to be written to respect the fact that many of these dishes will be fired in smaller batches, 6, 8 at a time, and we'll get to that. And then we have the saucing and the things that go with them. So we need to modify those recipes so that the team understands how to prepare and how to prep the food. The other thing by modifying the recipes will help us with, and one of the big positive outcomes of making sure we're really cooking to order, is that we'll reduce waste tremendously. Many times we talk about this with clients and they'll suspect, oh, this is probably going to cost me in raw food expense. The fact of the matter is, no, it's actually more affordable from a raw food standpoint. The labor becomes a little more intense, but there also shouldn't be a labor uptick after we get into a system. We're just moving the labor around slightly, but we're reducing food waste and thereby overall food cost. So the next part, of course, is the batch size. So this is really what we're talking about. Keeping our batches small, and by that what I mean, if you've been in your kitchens and seen that if we're preparing salmon tonight, many times you'll see your kitchen with a hotel pan of 20 to 30 fillets of salmon that have all been cooked and then put in the steam well ready for service. What we ask them to do in step one is to modify that in a couple of ways. One is, how can we add a textural element to that dish? How can we make it feel like it was cooked just for me? So what we'll do is take that salmon, for instance, and this can apply to excuse me, to any protein. We'll take that salmon, season it, and pan sear it on one side until it's golden brown and crispy. But the one side will still be raw. So we'll remove it from that pan and put it back into a small half hotel pan with no more than 6 to 8 portions with the raw side down, and we'll put it back into the cooler to chill down. So now we have a piece of salmon that has beautiful color and texture, but is still quite raw. At service time, we'll fire just that one pan, 6 to 8 portions of salmon. And when that is done, we'll pull it and put it onto the steam line so that we have the space to plate it. And we will plate the next 6 to 8 portions. The part I left out, as we pull that one pan of salmon, we have another one going in behind it, maybe another one 2 minutes behind that. So we have a rotation of the salmon being finished just as we need the next 6 to 8 orders. It's a technique that takes a little time for the chefs to adjust to, but believe me, it's only a couple of days before they catch on to that type of rotation system. They will be cooking now during service rather than just plating, so it's a little bit more effort. But what we get is a product coming right out of the oven. Beautiful color, crispy texture, and cooked through just perfect. But no more than 6 to 8. We can't plate any more than that anyway. Why would we need more than that on the line? There's a great picture here of the execution and the batch size, and you see on your left some grilled asparagus. So that asparagus was cleaned, blanched in boiling water, pulled out, and then plunged into ice cold water to set the color and to stop the cooking, so that the asparagus was beautifully 90% of the way cooked, chilled, back in the fridge and holding perfect. At mealtime, these asparagus either can be thrown into the oven and roasted, or thrown on the grill for a nice little grill flavor. It only takes about 30 seconds, and this is the largest batch that we would do at a time. This would then go on the line and go on the next 8 to 15 plates that are going on, and we have another batch ready to fire just behind that. So from an execution standpoint, we also have to remember that the steam table is not designed to hold food. And for many of us, I know that comes as a surprise. Where else do we hold the food? Well, the idea here is we don't hold food. But the steam table in particular is a landing area. It is not a place designed to hold food other than liquids. If you think about how a steam table works, it has steam coming up on the bottom of a pan. If that product is not touching that pan, it is receiving very little benefit from the heat that the moisture of the steam is providing in that pan. So solids, things like roasted potatoes and vegetables, are miserable in a steam table. They're not touching the pan, they're not getting any heat. And keep in mind, we're adding moisture to that environment regardless of the product. Some products benefit from moisture. Crispy, crunchy, textured things do not benefit from being in that high moisture environment. So if it's not touching the pan, it's not being warmed. And if it doesn't need steam, it's getting it anyway. The steam table is a landing area. It is not a holding area. We've got to put the food somewhere so that we can get it on the plate. That's what a steam table is designed for, not holding acres and acres of food. And you'll see many times that your staff at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon have that steam well cleaned. They're all buttoned up. They're quite proud of their organizational skills and set up. The second we put that food onto that steam well, it started deteriorating. And so if we hold it for 3 minutes, it's not as good as it was 3 minutes ago. You can imagine what it's like 20 minutes later, 40 minutes later, or 2 hours later. So the next part of this style or execution is the presentation. When it comes down to it, we all, and of course our seniors too, eat with their eyes first. We've written a beautiful menu. We understand the food. They're set up to have something beautiful. It has to come out looking beautiful. And taking the time for excellent presentations will really deliver you premium outcomes on the perception of the quality of the food. Believe me, this piece of salmon will be more delicious than one without the color, without the seasoning, without the plating looking so nice, but yet so simple. It's a very easy plate to put together. And what we cannot have is our teams reacting to the lowest common denominator in our dining rooms, right? We always have the one resident who says, I don't want that stuff on my salmon. I don't want my food touching. Why are you putting that green stuff on my plate? Well, that's fine. Let's see if we can accommodate that resident or those 2 residents. But let's not then make that the level of performance for our dining room. Excuse me. Let's make sure all our residents are getting this beautiful presentation, which takes no more time than a crummy presentation, by the way, to put on the plate. Let's make sure they're getting this, and then let's modify and help the residents who need more. The final piece of really being able to pull this through, after we talk about setting the table with great menus, setting the kitchen up, working on those small batches, and not using the steam table as a holding environment, is that we have to have the service piece. We have to deliver it now in a way that completes the circle. And a lot of that depends on the food knowledge of your servers. They have to be engaged and understand and appreciate what the kitchen is trying to accomplish through this process. That really requires daily stand-up meetings, what we call a pre-meal meeting, before each shift to talk through today's food. What are we doing? What is the difference? And how are we doing it? And then a commitment to making sure the hot food is served hot and cold food served cold as well. And then they have to understand the very fundamental steps of service. So food knowledge is just key. We've got to invest in our staff and have them become engaged. One of the really amazing things is how much power and influence you have over what your residents order. You may not believe that if you're not active in serving this every day. But a server who can come to the table and welcome the guests tonight, but say, oh my gosh, if you're still deciding what to have tonight, we just tried the salmon, and I don't even like salmon. It was delicious. It is so fresh. It came in today, and it's served with a little lemon sauce that's just light and wonderful. You will sell twice as many salmon as you ever have before. This power, this ability to influence your residents it shouldn't be underestimated, because you can change their world from a nutritional standpoint, from an enjoyment standpoint, and by the way, protect us from both a financial and an execution standpoint. If we start running low on tonight's lamb entree and we don't want it to run out, we know our servers now can influence the residents to perhaps order something different so that everyone gets what they want. You're not going to change someone's mind who just really wants the lamb and doesn't like salmon. But people who haven't decided yet, you will switch almost every time into the dish that they're comfortable with in selling. In order to know those flavors, the staff obviously has to taste the food. And every pre-meal, an entree plate should be plated up and tasted and discussed. So they also know what's in it, so they can protect residents against any food issues. They know the detail. They become more engaged with the food that we're going through. They understand the recipe details of what is in each dish. We've got to invest in the staff for them to become engaged in the food that we're trying to execute. On the delivery standpoint, look, we have to have a commitment to hot food delivered hot. It's got to be the #1 priority of the kitchen. When food comes up in the window, it's got to go to the table immediately. Everything else we've put in place is in order to do that. And we'll walk into kitchens and food is sitting there and no one seems to be aware of it or engaged by it. It's got to be an absolute focus for anyone who walks in the kitchen. That includes executive directors, managers, service people. Everyone's focus is hot food hot. And if there's food in the window, it needs to go to the table. We drop what we're doing and we get that food to the table. It is an important commitment, but a powerful one about what we're doing and the steps that we've taken to get there. Let's not let it break down at the last minute. And everyone participates in that delivery. And of course, it's just as critical that cold food is served cold as well. And we have to have that same commitment. But there's nothing like hot food hot. And for communities struggling with some of their quality issues, I assure you that focusing on temperature first, just delivering the food looking good and hot, will set the table for the rest of the progress that you want to make. Of course, we still have to have the fundamentals, and we have to have our staff trained. You know, what do the servers do at the table? How do they serve the plates? How do they clear the plates? The very fundamental steps of service, if we don't understand, all the good work we do with food will be overshadowed by a lack of quality service. And I know everyone has experienced that in a restaurant environment where the food was pretty good, but the service was either so slow or inappropriate, or you know, if they didn't bring me a fork, it would be really hard to enjoy what would have been a great meal. So these fundamentals have to be in place and worked on at the same time that we're working with the team. So again, it's these three very fundamental components of shifting your work from where you are now to a more restaurant-style delivery. Again, depending on the size and scope of your community, we can do truly a la minute. We can do an order per order. As the communities grow in size, we're doing batches of 6, 8. But beyond that, we can get just as much food out just as fast doing batches of 8 that we can with a hotel full of food. Maybe we have to work a little harder right at service period, but that's all. So we've got to design menus that are appropriate for this type of delivery. We've got to narrow the scope of what we do and focus on the quality. And then, of course, it's about execution, the preparation and presentation of what we're doing, making sure that we're delivering great food in this setting, and then the service piece, which completes the circle. The servers have to be knowledgeable and passionate about the food, and they're going to get that from your kitchen team. They're going to get that we are committed to this process, and they will feed off of it and start enjoying food. There's nothing more fun than taking a server who's never tried a particular item before and letting them try it for the first time in our kitchens. It really gets them engaged, and it's a fun process to be part of. So I think by using these, that you can begin delivering restaurant style in your community. You can push this effort through. It takes a commitment. It doesn't happen overnight, but it certainly can be done and done well. So that is my presentation. I'm sure there may be some questions. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but I'm having an audio issue here in hearing. I'm going to try to make some adjustments here and see if I can do it. But I can certainly see any typed messages, and I'll see if I can get back on the audio side. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I hope I'm back there. And now I think it sounds like I might be hearing some things. So I'd love to take your questions.
Great. Hi, David. It's Renee. Thank you very much. What a very informative webinar. I do have a couple questions for you. First is, this all sounds good, but where do we start?
Well, the best starting point is to start reducing the size and scope of your prep and reducing the time before meal period that you're allowing the team to get food completed. That is the absolute best starting point to say, guys, look, I really don't want that chicken in the oven at 4 o'clock. We don't have residents in the dining room until 5:15. Tell me how long that takes to cook, and we'll back that up and say, well, we're not putting in the oven until 5:15. That the team will become a little, if you will, not frantic, but they'll be pressured because they'll have a lot of things coming out of the oven at the same time. But that's what cooking's all about. That's what happens in a restaurant. We have a lot of things going on at the same time. So you need to just, first step is reduce the amount of time they're holding, and the second step is say, now I'd like you to split that into 3 pans, and let's do them one, and then put the other one in 5 to 10 minutes behind that one, and the other one 5 to 10 minutes behind that. Now we've got a half hour of meals. And I'll tell you, as you adjust to this, you know, there may be a delay in service. Maybe tonight we're not quite good at it yet. We have to wait 2 or 3 minutes because a pan isn't ready yet and I'm ready to plate. But the trade-off for the quality and the temperature and the look of that coming out of the oven is worth a 1 or 2 minute delay. Trust me, every time. But quickly they'll adjust.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's another question that's coming through. What is an appropriate number of cooks to have on staff per meal when serving 120 to 150 residents per meal?
So that's a really difficult question to answer without knowing the specific type of food and the length of the meal period, the size of your dining room. So if you're only seating 70 people in your dining room, but yet you turn it 2 times, that's a different staffing ratio, which is, by the way, very important to understand. We all want big dining rooms. We want everybody to come in. That means that we've got to get all of our food out at the, very close to the same time. That requires maybe 3 people on the line to execute that. If I have a smaller dining room and the meal period is stretched over a longer period of time, I could certainly do that many people, those with 2. But I've seen that staffed anywhere from 5 to 2. I think 2 to 3 is appropriate, but again, it's within that range. I can't answer that exactly right.
Okay, thank you. Another question coming in is, any resources on batch cooking for training staff?
Any resources? Boy, I don't know that. Well, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, there's one, strategic dining services. That's what we do in the field. But in terms of
good answer.
Yeah, in terms of resources like online or tools, I'm not aware of any. It's really kind of a hands-on approach. You have to roll up your sleeves and get in there and really show the team what you're asking them to do.
Sure. Another question. Our residents tell us they don't want fancy food, just plain meat and potatoes. How do we get them to accept the menu descriptions like your examples today?
So that's a great question, and all of those have to be written with your particular residents in mind. One of the things we do, for instance, as a management company is that we're designing menus and recipes every day for specific locations and types of residents. We can't have just a cookie cutter, here's our menu, or here's the menu that I just showed you. That was merely an example of how we can augment to entice and to make the menus seem better. Your residents may have a different need, and so your changing of your menu might read slightly different, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. You may have to be careful of some of the words that you use or choices. But instead of writing meatloaf, we are going to write, country meatloaf with buttermilk mashed potatoes and, pan gravy. That still sounds better than just meatloaf. So there are ways to rewrite every menu that is appropriate for the residents. But one of the most critical things that you need to remember is that we're not writing those menus just for our residents. keep in mind that it's important for our family members who read those menus and look at them and say, wow, mom or dad are getting something special here. Our staff and our team, they work in that community and want to see something special or better. And don't forget our potential residents who come in and tour the community. And yes, maybe the residents there want meat and potatoes, but what you may notice is that the residents who are starting to look at your community maybe want something a little bit more. So a balance. So one dish is very plain and folksy reading. The next one has a little more excitement to it. So both resident, family member, and potential resident can find something in that menu that looks great for them. But there's no one straight fix.
Okay, thank you very much. As of now, I don't have another question. I do want everyone to pay attention to their screen that you get 10% off your first 6 months of services, and how to receive that discount when you contact us. You mentioned the webinar presentation and receive your 10% off. It was a great webinar, David. Thank you very much. I'm getting hungry now for lunch after listening to this fabulous presentation, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope everyone really understands that this is a process they can do, and it's worth the commitment and time. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much.